This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Leary, and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Allan Dorans. Now, Allan is a former member of the Metropolitan Police. He went into the private world, private business, and then became a member of the SNP and represented his constituency up until the last election. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Paul. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Now, have I got that right? Have I encapsulated?
Yeah, you've captured 69 years and 25 seconds, Paul. So yeah, it's
Fantastic.
Great.
So where did it all begin for you, Allan, and what was your inspiration to join the Metropolitan Police?
It all began for me in a small mining village in South Ayrshire called Daly. My dad was a miner at the time. He was previously a professional soldier and fought in World War II. He was a Chindit, fought behind Japanese lines twice, and was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal for Valour. And he often joked that if he had been killed, it would have been the Victoria Cross.
Wow.
But then I wouldn't have been here. Now, I got a citation. It was fantastic reading. So I was born in Daly, the youngest of 9 children, and we were poor. And we talk about poverty and child poverty now. They will never reach the same depth of poverty that we experienced. With 9 children, my dad on a minimum wage as a miner then, we struggled. I wore cast-offs and hand-me-down clothes and went to school with holes in my shoes. And my 3 elder brother and I shared a room. We had coal heating, and we had no money. So my inspiration for joining the police, I just wanted to get out of Daly. I always saw myself as a kind of reasonable guy who could see both sides of an argument, and saw myself as having no particular views on anything, which made me fairly neutral, and I could go along with most discussions. So I applied to be a cadet in 1971, and I sent off a letter to the commissioner saying, a handwritten letter saying, can I become a police cadet? I was 16. I'd already left school, having told him I'd already joined the police, which unfortunately was not actually true, but it came good. In due course, I got an application form. I sent it off. I got invited to London for an exam and a medical and a physical, which I passed. And then in January 1972, I left Daly to join the Metropolitan Police Cadet Corps. I left with the help of a grant from Social Security for clothes, because you had to have a certain level of dress to represent the police. You had to have a blazer and a pair of trousers and 2 shirts and smart shoes.
Wow.
None of which I had. So my mum took me along to the Social Security office in the local town, and we got a voucher, and we went up to the next town to buy clothes. And they gave me a travel warrant. So by the age of 16 and a half, I got on a train and went to London with a couple of pounds in my pocket, my life's belongings in a suitcase, a second-hand suitcase, obviously. And there started my career in the police. And that was me. On, I think it was the 9th of January 1972, I arrived at the gates of Hendon with my suitcase and began my career in the police.
Wow. What was that like, though? You've gone from a small place in Scotland to the bright lights of London. Had you been to London before?
No, never.
Wow. That's incredible, isn't it? I mean, and what was that like when you arrived at King's Cross or whatever station you were at?
Yeah, Euston. Yeah,
Euston.
Made my way out to Colindale, which is station for Hendon, the police training school. Met on arrival by a couple of cadets who showed me around, showed me into my dormitory, which I shared with 7 other cadets. And settled in on the next day. We got into the real business. Now, the Cadet Corps was a fabulous opportunity because although you're a member of the police service as such, it was very much concentrated on education, both classroom did O-levels and things, and physical education, keep fit, sports, and 50% education, 40% physical, and 10% police duties. So there's no real emphasis on police work. You're there. I think it was designed to catch people with a very short policeman at a time, to catch people leaving school who would otherwise have gone into the job market somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it would have been lost to the police. So I did 18 months at Hendon, and I met on the same day I joined John Murray, who we'll talk about a bit later. John came from Aberdeen, fellow Scot, and we joined on the same day. And we lived in the same accommodation house, the 4 houses named after previous commissioners.
Yeah.
So John and I were both in Fielding House, and on a Friday afternoon, when everyone else went home, there might have been half a dozen of us, some from Northern Ireland, some from Wales, and some from Scotland, who were there all weekend on our own. So I got to know John very well. We were friends, and we'll talk about John a bit later, but we were good friends, and I couldn't understand the word he said because he's from Aberdeen, and he told me, fit like, went, how are you? And but we became firm friends anyway. We drifted apart after the first phase of the training finished.
Yeah.
So from then we went on to phase 2, which was essentially adventure training. We did rock climbing, canoeing, trekking. We climbed Snowdon. Fabulous. You know, as a 16, then maybe 17-year-old. We did that. Then on the third phase, the final phase of cadet training, we did attachments to social services. I did, I think, 3 months attachment to Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where I met Jimmy Saville. Which was
you actually met him?
I did meet him a couple of times. He was working as a porter there. Cold fish is all I'll say about him. Never knew him, but met him a couple of times. Yeah. Worked for a period, I think about a month in a hospital in casualty as a hospital porter. And my memory of the hospital is that we spent the morning in maternity, with permission obviously from the people there, and an afternoon in the mortuary, witnessing postmortems. And then the final bit, the best bit of it all, was an attachment to a police station as a cadet. And I got sent off to Paddington Green, which is a great place. It's a really, really busy police station. And you can imagine now about 18 sitting in the back of an instant response car being whizzed around off central London. So my time in the cadets was a memory I'll never forget. Made great friends and learned so much, you know, coming from, you know, at a village with a population of about 1,000, going to London and doing all that before I was 19. So fantastic. Nothing but praise and thanks for the Metropolitan Police for allowing me that opportunity.
And this
was great.
Sorry, this is a time when things were happening in London, weren't they? You're talking sort of 1974. The IRA were at their peak.
Yeah, they were.
What was that like? What was the atmosphere like? It's something that you couldn't bottle, but what was the Balcombe Street siege, all those types of things?
Yeah, they were all going on. And they continued throughout my police career. And I remember all of those very clearly. I remember Balcombe Street. In fact, the inspector in charge of the initial operation at Balcombe Street, his name escapes me, but he was a relief inspector as attached to Paddington. Right. And he's a very strict character. And he got BM. So we had that. We had the Hyde Park bombings. We had Harrods bombings. There was always a tension. There was always an atmosphere of you had to be on alert. And if you went to a suspicious parcel, you never knew what you're going into. You never know what it could be. It could be real. Yeah. It was an interesting time. I think in 1975, a guy called Stephen Tibble, who was in a class behind me at training school. So he's a probationary cop, He worked at Fulham. He was driving either home from work or to work, and he came across a couple of detectives chasing someone. And Stephen drove in front of him, got off his moped, stood in the middle of the road with his arms outstretched like this to stop the guy. And the guy shot him dead twice in the chest. And there's an IRA member of the American called Liam something, and he'd just come out of a bomb factory. And the two guys, I worked with one of them at a later stage as well, Derek Wilson. The two guys had been on a burglary patrol. They weren't particularly looking for the IRA, and they thought, that guy looks a bit suspicious. And he came out of a flat, and they went to stop him. They ran. And he eventually went to America, but he was extradited and stood trial and got convicted of the murder of Stephen. And he was released under the Good Friday Agreement.
Right.
Liam Quinn, his name was. So Stephen, compatriot of mine who I knew fairly well at training school, murdered by IRA on the streets of West London. So that was always there. And I remember even in later service being very acutely aware that the IRA were active and we could come across them at any time. So it was difficult. But to go back to the police, I went to Hendon, did 16 weeks, residential training, very intense, high pressure. Few people dropped out, but it was fabulous. The training I had in the police has undoubtedly beaten any training I've ever had anywhere else. Because to think you went away for 16 weeks, you had a week, I think the 11th week, you went out on division to the police station you're going to go to after the school. And again, just fabulous memories. And eventually I went to, as a PC, I went to the police station called Acton in West London.
Yep.
Which is a busy subdivision of station, part of the Ealing subdivision. And I went on a relief, as we called them, and there were four fellow Scots already there, who made me very welcome. And again, you go out and you're walking down the high street with your big helmet on, thinking, God, I hope no one asks me anything. I don't know anything about anything. But in reality, you did, because you had your radio. If the shift before you had to remember to put up in charge, and you could always get help. And the guys were great, and it's a ready-made life. You know, you stayed in police accommodation, you mixed with police. The older cops are married, invite you to dinner, and you, being Scottish, we've always had a New Year's party somewhere. And they're great guys. Unfortunately, 3 of the 4 of them have since died because we're moving on up the ladder a wee bit. But fabulous memories, and I'm still in touch with an inspector. My relief inspector is now in his 80s and living in the Seychelles.
Wow!
But you met people like that. So there was great, and they taught me to drive. They sent me to a 5-week residential course, and at the end of the course, you took a driving test with an external examiner, and you got sent back to division to drive Panda cars. And to be honest, it wasn't enough. You know, I remember going out in the Panda car the first few times, stalling and trying to do hill starts and rolling back in towards other cars, and just it was great to do though. But it wasn't perfect by any means.
But Acton was a different place then. I mean, it's got a very high density population of different minority groups. Was it like that then, or is it?
Yes, it was. It was very much very cosmopolitan. Quite a stable, established population of English people. But there were a number of Greeks, a number of West Indies in particular, and certainly a dabbling of people from the Asian subcontinents.
Right.
So it's very cosmopolitan. You never knew quite what you were going to do, and turning up in a Panda car, not knowing what you're going into. You get a call, you go to a disturbance, not knowing what the hell the disturbance is going to be. And I would say that the comradeship in the place, and I'm sure you experienced this, where you asked for help, or you shouted for help, and everyone came.
Everyone.
And during the couple of years I wasn't there very long. Now, I'll tell you why in a moment. But I had an attitude that I would volunteer for everything.
Yep.
And anything that came up, I was first out of my seat, first into the car. And that I saw it as being the way to learn, to gain experience, and to gain confidence, because I wasn't a particularly outspoken kind of guy. And I certainly couldn't speak in public in those days. And, in fact, when I was at school, if a teacher spoke to me, I'd get red-faced, embarrassed, So being in the place helped me develop confidence, and say I volunteer for everything. And I'll tell you a quick story about, I had a number of sudden deaths, and over a period of a couple of months. And I always volunteered because I wanted to know what you did in certain circumstances, and if they're all different. And they included cot deaths, and included suicides, and included all sorts of stuff like that. And I became a bit of an expert on the process for dealing with sudden deaths.
Right.
And one of my friends on the relief, I won't use his real name, he's still about, I don't know if he listens. But he was, shall we say, highly strung, and he hated dealing with dead people.
Right.
Yeah, he avoided it like the plague. And one morning in about 1976, I was walking in the high street, and he called me up. He was driving a Panda, and said, "Alan, can I meet you?" So we went along to this house where there was an elderly neighbour not seen for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And it was during the days of the power strikes and the 3-day week, and there was no lights. But the milkman had noticed there was 6 or 8 bottles of milk outside his door, and there's newspaper stuff for his letterbox. And we spoke to the neighbour, who said, "Yeah, he's elderly, he's been not well. We fear the worst." So, he said his name there. And I went into the big end of terrace detached Victorian house. So we broke in through the back window, and with the help of hand torches, pathetic little things, we did a systematic search of the house. And we started on the ground floor, and we did the living room and the kitchen, and it's pitch dark apart from our torches. And Gordon is terrified, and nothing on the ground floor. So with the help of our torches, we made our way upstairs. And by this time, Gordon is holding on to the back of my jacket, the tail of my jacket. And I said, "It's fine, Gordon, it's fine." The second floor to what's obviously the main bedroom, and open the door, and complete darkness, and there's a shape in the bed. So I said, "Right, well, Gordon, we found him. The procedure is we've got to look at him. We've got to see if he's got a knife sticking in his back or anything. So we need to examine the body." That was kind of standard protocol. So Gordon is kind of standing behind me, and I could feel him physically shaking. And so I go up to the bed, and I pull back the blanket, and the guy suddenly goes, "What are you doing in my bedroom?" and Gordon, not exaggerating here, ran down the stairs, into the Panda car, and put the window locked. And of course, the poor guy had been not well, and he hadn't been out for a week, and suddenly woke up at 6:30 in the morning. There's 2 cops standing in darkness in his bedroom. So I promised Gordon that I wouldn't tell anyone back at the police station about that, and I didn't. It's now 40 years ago, and it's
absolutely.
It says his name there as well. So it wasn't all grief and hard work, but it's enjoyable. There's a sense of being a team, of helping each other, and being there for each other and backing each other up. Very much.
76 was a very long, hot summer, wasn't it? I mean, we were experiencing some very, very hot temperatures.
We did.
No aircon in the police cars, although we didn't have body armour at that time. I wasn't in the job
Nothing.
then.
Short sleeve holder and sunglasses. No, nothing. A truncheon. They didn't even have handcuffs in those days.
Right.
96. I was in the job 7 years before I got my own handcuffs. And people find that hard to believe in this day and age, but all we had was a truncheon, a notebook, and a whistle.
Incredible. Well,
And
when you had a briefing, what was that like? You'd go into your police station for your duty.
Yeah.
What was that like for you as a section for your morning briefings or evening, night briefings?
Well, the first thing is you had to be there quarter of an hour before. You had to be there, if you started at 7 in the morning, you had to be there 6:45 to parade.
Right.
And you go in, they're normally held in the locker room or some secure room, and you get dressed, and some inspectors insisted that you show your appointments. So you had to show your truncheon, your whistle, and your notebook. And you sit there like that with your truncheon in one hand, your whistle draped over your arm, and your notebook in your other hand. And the sergeant would come down and read from the parade book, as it's called, highlighting any current news or investigations or places to look out for, people who are wanted. And the more turned on ones would also bring down the crime book and say, this is a crime for the last couple of years, like a couple of weeks, the last couple of days, whatever it was, depending on when you started your shift. And they'd say, I'd lost a stolen car, blue Cortina, it's always Ford Cortinas, registration number stolen from so and so. So he'd write all this down, and then you go off and have a cup of tea and then make out your way out onto the street, whether you're driving a Panda or walking a beat or crewing the van or the area car. And that was it. And you did quite disciplined in as much that having been given your duties for the day, your beat or your Panda car, if you went back into the police station, you're supposed to sign back in and sign out again.
Yeah.
So that you're hiding in the police station. And you just, at the end of the day, at the end of a shift, 15 minutes before the end, you came back and the sergeant would come down and say, any reports? And if you had anything to tell them, then you did. And you moved on with your day. And I got to say that quite often involved going to the pub.
Yep.
After the early shift, you go from 2 in the afternoon to 3 in the afternoon, or after the late shift, you go from 10 to 11. And most of the shifts would go with you.
Yeah.
And that was part of the job, because you could decompress, you could talk about things that happened, you could learn from other people what they dealt with and catch up with all the kind of social stuff.
And your communications then, what sort of radios would you have been using at that time?
We were using the old Stormer phones, which weighed a ton, had a big battery, the size of a big mobile phone for the battery. And it had to be charged between shifts. Sometimes it's one of the jobs of the assistant station officer to charge the batteries, and sometimes they forgot.
Right.
And you'd come in and you'd have radios, but the batteries were either dead or dying. And you fairly often had to go out without a radio, which is appalling in this.
Oh, you can imagine it now. Mind you, they've all got their phones now.
We wouldn't go out. We wouldn't go out, I don't think. And again, it was past the era of the police box, not by much, because some of the guys on the shift remember the police boxes and would tell you if there's a police box there at that point, but they were well gone by the time I started.
But put it in perspective. If you've gone in 1972 in the cadets, there would be people leaving the police service who would have joined. They probably served during the Second World War.
They did,
and you'd have been working with a whole. It's hard to imagine now, isn't it, that those great people that you were working with would have been fighting on the beaches in Normandy or out where your dad was in the Chindits, and I know policing's evolved; it's a different world. But these characters, these great characters, were just coming to the conclusion of their service whilst you start yours.
Yeah, they were great. They were characters. Every one of them had proudly wore their World War II medals. Some had seen a lot of active service, some had seen none. But the they're very disciplined. They're always very smart or immaculate in some cases, to the old Diamond discipline. And they had a certain manner about them that you respected them because you knew what they had been through.
Yeah.
You're right, they were coming to the very end of the service. There's just one or two who were kind of local community cops towards the end, or office jobs, quite rightly, just to see the service out.
Yeah.
But they were certainly characters.
So where did you go from there?
From there, you had to have 5-year service to set the sergeant's exam in those days.
Right.
So I quite fancied being a sergeant. So I asked if I could sit the exam, and I had to go to an interview with the chief superintendent, who asked me what I'd done in the last couple of years, my first 2 probationary years, and I told him, and he gave me permission to apply to take the exam, the sergeant's exam, which was competitive. Let's say they wanted 300 sergeants. You might have 800 people take the exam, but only the top 300 actually got promoted. And there was a special section for people with over 10 or 15 years service, so they could also get selected by different means. But you had to pass as a competitor to guarantee promotion. I got permission, I took the exam, and I passed the exam with just over 2 years service. But I then applied to go on the special course for Bramshill, which is for the high-flying leaders, they call them now.
Yeah.
Similar along to the army, like Santos, Bramshill was the police senior officer training college. And I've got absolutely no doubt that because of my background, having come from a mining village, never having been to university, and done nothing but street duty, I didn't get it. I wasn't selected for the senior management course at Bramshill. So 2 years service, having passed the exam, waiting for my 5 years to be up, I was encouraged to join the CID, which I didn't have a particular interest in, but I was encouraged to join it. And I didn't realize at the time that it was part of breaking down the old CID, of rooting out the corruption that had been there in the 60s, perhaps 70s.
Yep.
Certainly the 60s with a guy called Dick Challoner. And people did get fitted up in those days. Not in my day, I didn't see it. So I applied to the CID, I became a detective, moved around a little bit, and then with 5 years service, I got promoted to uniform sergeant, a part of what they called interchange.
Right.
Again, it's to break up the old CID. If the CID passed the sergeant's exam, they had to go back to uniform. And I went to a police station called Hammersmith as a uniform sergeant, which was a revelation to me, because if I thought Acton was busy, and it was because of the small number of cops you had, Hammersmith, you'd go into parade, and you'd have 14 or 15 cops.
Wow.
And you'd have, Jesus, and the vast majority of them walked a beat, because Hammersmith is a very small. But it was also, I think, third or fourth busiest police station in the country. It was a holding station for prisoners, for female prisoners. It had its own matron to look after the female prisoners. And it was a whirlwind. The charge room door was a revolving door.
Yeah. And
it never stopped. You're always busy. You always had 10, 15 prisoners in the cells. You had the sergeant, there's a station officer. You had an assistant. But it was just incredible. It was just what an experience to learn. Thrown in at the deep end, again, supportive inspector, great cops, just wanted to go out there and do it. The Hammersmith Pally next door on a Friday, Saturday night, with 4 cops outside it every night. And just come 11 o'clock, the charge room door would just start to rattle open, and people would fall in fighting, and just rolling about on the ground.
And they had some great bands there as well in that day.
It happened. It happened sort of every Friday, Saturday, perhaps Sunday night, and I think maybe a Wednesday night we had a special night. And we did Hammersmith Odeon, we had QPR, we had Fulham, we had Aid to Chelsea, so you had all that going on. And the requirement was you did a year as a uniform sergeant before you went back to CID. And I almost didn't go back. I did, and I went back to CID in 1980. I got posted out to Twickenham as a detective sergeant, and I hated it.
Did you? Why?
I hated it because having had a year of complete bedlam and madness, it was too quiet.
Oh, was it?
And just, you go in, there's only two of you on late shift at CID, and you go in and there'd be maybe a burglary in the book. You go out and investigate it, or you do, whatever it is. But I did it for a year, and I asked, by this time as a uniform chief superintendent, that had taken over the CID, because that's the other thing they did with the CID. They took away the difference between uniform and CID, made us only one chief, the uniform chief superintendent.
Yeah.
So I went to see him and I said, look, I really don't like it here. He said, Alan, you're the best detective we've got. I'm not recommending you for transfer. So I said, okay, fine. I want to go back to uniform then as a uniform sergeant. I want to go back to Hammersmith or somewhere busy.
Yeah.
And he relented and he put in a request for me to be transferred. So he transferred me as far as possible away as I could from where I lived. I lived in the outskirts, a place called Sunbury-on-Thames near Heathrow.
Yeah.
So it transferred me as a detective sergeant into the West End to what's called E Division. So instead of doing a 3 or 4 mile journey every day, I was doing a 25, 26 mile round trip, 14, 15 miles each way. But that was fine. And I got what I wanted, and I went to Holborn in the West End, where I did 4 years, mainly on crime squads or general CID stuff. And again, it was just great. And we had some great cases and some great jobs and got a lot of good time at Holborn. One in particular sticks in my mind, and it was a guy, a woman, an Australian woman, walking through University College London on a Sunday afternoon, walking through the grounds, and a guy came up behind her and stabbed her in the back.
Oh, God.
With a machete-type knife, and just stabbed her in the back. So that was allocated for someone to investigate. We didn't get anywhere with it. And then they realised that a couple of weeks earlier, there had been a similar stabbing.
So there was a similar stabbing on the London Underground.
Yeah, and a week after that, a week after the university one, there's a similar stabbing in a neighbouring division. I think it was actually Marylebone or Paddington. Right. So because there was no coordination of these crimes between British Transport Police and even internally within the Met, the guy had gone out and stabbed 3 people in the back without any reason that we could discern. So I was on a crime squad at the time, and we came down and we kind of, I wouldn't say we immersed the area because we had about 6 of us, but we patrolled the area looking for a guy, and the only description we had was Jesus hair but clean shaven.
Yep.
And we get this guy, he's got Jesus hair, but he's got a full beard.
Right.
So we stop him anyway, and he's obviously mentally ill, this guy, because he's rambling. And so I said, I'm going to search you. He said, no, you're not. So we're going to search you. So we got up against the railing and we searched him. The cops have got a machete.
Wow.
Down his trousers. So he gets arrested and taken back to the police station. And I was thinking, this is the guy, it could be the guy who stabbed the woman in the back, but she said he was clean shaven. So we go and see her in hospital and say, are you sure he was clean shaven? Because the guy we've got, he's just got a beard. And she says, no, he's clean shaven. So we go back and we say to him, you've been investigated for this attempted murder. Fuck off. I wouldn't talk to police. Police means lice. You're all lice. You're all vermin. You're all scum. Anyway, a very long story short, he'd escaped from a mental home.
Oh.
And it was one of these orders that if you stayed free for more than 30 days, you are considered safe to look after yourself.
Right.
And he had 2 days before his 30 days was up. So, of course, he had no money, no home, and no food. So they found another number of robberies at supermarkets, same guy, knife. So we said to the woman, you said he was just clean shaven. She says, actually, I've been thinking about that. And when he stabbed me, I fell. I was lying on the ground, and he was walking away from me with his head turned. And the only view I had of him was, to be honest, from his nose up.
Right.
So I could be wrong about him being clean shaven. So we'll go back to him and put that to me. He wouldn't have it. Anyway, we built up enough evidence from the other cases, and we found his psychiatrist. This is a really peculiar story. We found a psychiatrist, and we said to him, we suspect he's done all these stabbings, attempted murders, and all these robberies. He said, well, tell me about the stabbings. What were the victims wearing? So I said, I don't know. So I go back to the woman and say, what are you wearing? She was wearing a plaid coat, tartan coat.
Yep.
And the other 2 victims who were stabbed were also wearing some form of tartan. And she said, yeah, that figures. He's triggered by tartan, believe it or not. Lucky he doesn't live in Scotland.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, he will not tell a lie. So however you frame your questions to him, you need to be very clever, because he will respond, but he will not lie. So we went back to him, we tried this, and eventually we got him to admit to the 3 attempted murders. And we took him to court on the Monday. I asked for him to be remanded in police custody to investigate a number of other matters. And he objected. He said, no, I want to plead guilty today. So anyway, that's a long story. He had somewhere he was staying. We found a key in his pockets, but he wouldn't tell us where he was, where he lived. We never found where that guy lived. But he was sentenced to a mental home for the rest of his life. Now, just to complete that story, some years later, there's a program on TV where there's a fly-on-the-wall documentary looking for either an assistant chief constable or a chief constable. And it's a big affair. They take them out to dinner with the mayor and the leader of the council and whoever it was, and a big multi thing, just to see how the social skills were, these applicants for the chief constable. And then there's interview. So this guy, I'm sitting there thinking, that's John Burbeck. I don't mind using his name. He was a DI, my DI, back in that day, the stabbings. And they said to him, Mr. Burbeck, tell us about your most successful case. He told my story. That was me.
That was you.
And he just totally stole it.
How funny. Success has many fathers.
Yeah, but he didn't get the job.
Did he?
But he went on to be an assistant chief constable.
Oh, how funny is that? So Holborn, I mean, you're right in the heart of London there, aren't you? Literally Covent Garden and all around there. And in the 80s, it was busy. I mean, London's busy now, but of course you had things like the Brixton riots and the summers of discontent, which we saw some of that last night, unfortunately, up in Merseyside. But what was that like? From a policing perspective.
I went to the 1981 Brixton riots as an investigator afterwards.
Right.
Where they did all limited CCTV they had then, but they had camera evidence and identified people. So I was one of the team that went out and arrested the suspects. and hand them over to the local team who interviewed them and charged them, things like that. But I spent a few weeks at Brixton in 1981. The West End of London was a fantastic place to work. Again, in a different way to Hammersmith, which is rough and ready, more sophisticated. There's more credit card fraud along Oxford Street and all the places there. But Holborn was a good place to work, and they covered places like Kentish Town and Camden Town and rough and ready places. And again, the whole spectrum of everything. But Holborn was a great place to work, despite the travel for me. And then while I was there, I studied for the inspector's exam, passed it, and it's just a matter of time. Again, competitive, they wanted 80, and there's 200 people took it, and I was in the middle of the 80 who passed it. And I went out to Wimbledon as an uniform inspector.
Oh my life, you've been all over the
I have. And I didn't want to go. I had memories of Twickenham and how quiet that was. And a guy who was an inspector, who'd been a PC at Paddington when I was a cadet, who took me under his wing a wee bit, phoned me up and said, Alan, go to Wimbledon. It's great, because you've got Wimbledon, which is rich and prosperous, and you've got Mitcham, which is a very working class council estate, basically. A huge council estate, Mitcham. That's been a bit unkind to people who live in Mitcham, but the contrast between Wimbledon and Mitcham was just total. And it was a great year. And that was in 1985. And then, never having done a day's riot training, for want of a better expression, shield training, I called it in those days, the miners' strike comes along. And in the duties book, I see to my horror, I'm leading a team of 2 sergeants and 20 cops on a serial going to West Yorkshire on the miners' strike. And I'd got no idea about employment law or striking, particularly, or public order. But they sent me with a serial to the miners' strike.
But so this is the boy, one of 9, whose dad was a miner. How was that for you? Because you've seen the struggles that the miners have gone through in your own childhood. How was that for you to go up to Yorkshire?
I went very much with the attitude, I've got sympathy for these guys, because having gone down the pit one day when I was about 15 and saw this guy standing crouched up under a crevice with a pick, stripped to the waist because it's so hot down there, hacking away at a coal face with water running through his legs and pitch dark apart from the wee head torch. And we would go up and I find out this guy's my dad. I thought, there's no way in the world am I ever going to go down the pit to work. And that's one of my reasons for getting out. So we got called out to a a stoking plant, somewhere that processes coal anyway.
Coke, the coking plant.
Oh, a coking plant, that's exactly what it
Yeah.
What it was. So we get called out at 4 a.m. Well, we were sitting in coaches anyway, and sleeping in the floor of a gym in the police training school up there, Derbyshire headquarters. Me and my 2 sergeants, 20 cops, all sleeping on the floor. So we get called out, and there's a bus. No, it wasn't. It was a delivery of some kind, or lorries going in to take the coke out. And the miners were protesting outside to stop it going in. So I arrived. Now, to be honest, I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, I took my hat off and I went out and said, "Hi guys, my name's Alan. I've got a lot of sympathy with you, but we've got to do this, and I can only allow 6 guys here. And all I'll do is I'll send out 6 guys as well instead of the 20. and hopefully we can see this through. And it worked. I said, well, we're not looking for trouble either, officers. So if you're okay with that. And as the lorries came up, the guys were all in conversation and just let them go through.
Mm.
Thankfully, because if it had to arrest people, I'd have no idea where to take them, or what to do with them. I'd obviously have got on the radio and found out, but sent out there, had a briefing, to be fair. And I went back a second time as well, but I never really got deployed, particularly much.
There's still a rub up there, isn't there, with the people that were involved from the striking side, and there's still a lot of mistrust against the police, and the police were doing their job at the end of the day. That's what we did.
Yeah.
We were there to keep the peace, and I do believe that there were some sections of the mining community that didn't actually want to go on strike.
Yeah,
and it was Arthur Scott
and Yorkshire, I think, was it protected. But anyway, I went and I did a couple of weeks in the miners' strike, and one of my friends here in Scotland is a councillor. I was an ex-miner, and he got arrested on the picket line. And him and I talk about it often, and he led the campaign to have their conviction squashed in Scotland.
Oh, really?
Which is great. A guy called Jim McMahon. But yeah, you go through the whole gamut of ups and downs in the place, and excitement, and serious situations. I had a Stanley knife held to my throat once by a mentally ill man, and I wrote about a railway platform with a mentally ill man who, so you saw stuff with mental illness. It's just not new. It was always there.
It was always there, but we had units that dealt with mental health. It was when we started putting people back into the community.
Yeah.
We've actually, progressive governments, and we'll come on to politics shortly. Progressive governments have put people into the community and put them at greater levels of risk as individuals, and put sections of society back at risk. It's a terrible, terrible state, and mental health people don't deserve to be in prison. They shouldn't be in prison. They should be getting the appropriate support. But what year did you decide that enough was enough and you were going to leave the Met?
Having done all that, and I'm sure you could as well talk for hours about things that happened in the place, the things you got involved in, the successes, the highs, the lows. Having done all that, become an inspector at 28, and the detective inspector at 29. So I heard about the opportunity to have a career development interview.
Right.
As an inspector. So I went along to New Scotland Yard to meet this, I think he's a superintendent, might have been a chief superintendent, who would have been about 32, 33 perhaps. Pretty same age as me.
Yep.
Who had his nickname was Milky Bar Kid, because he looked about 12, blonde hair, glasses, not particularly imposing kind of guy, Milky Bar Kid. And I went along for this career interview with him. He had a double first degree in something or other, performing arts or something from, but psychology or something from Oxford or Cambridge, Oxford, I think. So he was an intellectual graduate, obviously fast track. And he said to me, what have you done in your police career? So I went through all of that, a bit more detail. He says, and what university did you go to? I said, well, I didn't go to university. I left school at 16 and went to police cadets. Yeah, well, what newspapers do you read? Well, to be honest, I'm an operational cop. I don't have time to read paper. Oh, okay. What involvement have you had in the community in respect of strategic decisions within town hall? I said, well, I haven't. I've been an operational cop all my service. And he says, well, I don't see a great career for you. That's not quite what he said. But if you take my advice, you'll get into something like Juvenile Bureau, investigating police officers, complaints against police, or some other community-facing police-type organisation, so that you're not just a cop. I said, but I am just a cop. He said, no, but you need to be more than a cop. Anyway, he says, yeah, you'll probably make chief inspector within a couple of years, but to be honest, I don't see much more future for you than that. So I thought, oof. So that was the kind of the beginning of it, of my disillusionment with the police. So I thought, you know, I've given all my working life to the police, and to be told that what they want is academics who can hold debates and talk at town council meetings, that wasn't for me. So I thought, you know. Anyway, so I went back to division, and I thought about it. And then I got a phone call from a detective training school. I was a uniform inspector at the time, due to go back to become a detective inspector. And I got a phone call from a detective training school saying, Alan, we know you, we know of you. We'd like you to be an instructor at the detective training school. I thought, me? I'm the wee guy who gets red when people talk to me when I was at school. He said, no, we know your work. We know you're a good detective. We know you've got skills you're looking for. Don't worry about the training skills. We can give you them. But again, it's in my head that it's part of changing the culture of the police.
Yeah.
And it wasn't go along, yeah, you fit them up, you give them a jemmy, or you give them a set of car keys when you stop them. Or it was more about being an honest cop with integrity, which is what they wanted. So I did it, and I did it for a year, but to be honest, I didn't like it. It's some good fun there, don't get me wrong. And we did, in the year I was there, I think we did 4 10-week courses. 10 weeks, why are you going the residential course for 10 weeks to become a detective now? And then I led, along with a couple of other DIs, we did that course, a 10 weeks, took them from the beginning. Fantastic course, fantastic learning course, all structured, and culminating at the end of it with them graduating as detectives. So that was great, but it wasn't for me after a year. So we decided, my wife, I haven't mentioned my wife, I suppose she's quite an important part of this story.
She is.
My wife and I met, she's a WPC. We met at what we called the Section House, which is police accommodation in Brentford. And we started going out after a year. And eventually we moved in together, and we rented a flat. Although I wasn't allowed to stay there because her mother was a very strong Catholic. So on a Sunday I had to move all my stuff into a cupboard so her mother didn't see it. But anyway, my wife went on to be a WDC, one of the first WDCs on the regional crime squad, number 9 regional crime squad.
Wow. And
she got more commendations for police work and bravery than I ever did. She was a decoy at a petrol station where they knew it was going to be subject to an armed robbery by 3 or 4 black guys, and she took up the cashier bit, putting off and the flying squad who were there when these guys, and let them get up to 4 o'clock with their guns before the flying squad took. And she did various other decoy stuff for sex offenders and stuff. But anyway, she'd had enough. She's a very, very good cop, and she wanted to come to Scotland. So we decided, she's a good cook, we'd look for perhaps a hotel or a pub that did food, and we'd do that. Things that ex-cops do. So it's about 17 years service, I guess. We bought a pub in Scotland and moved up to Scotland. Mistake.
Was it?
The only way you can make money in a pub, and I know a lot of ex-cops do go into pubs.
Yeah, they do.
The only way you can make money of it is to work yourself and not pay staff.
Yeah.
And you know, the mind-blowingly dullness and boringness opening a pub at 11 o'clock in the morning, and the same 2 or 3 people come in, and then the same at night, you got the same drunk. So didn't like it at all. So we sold up and moved up to Ayr, where we now live. So now we bought a big house in Ayr, which is bed and breakfast, which is fine. And I needed to work. So I applied for a seasonal job as a training manager at a well-known holiday company, Butlins.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So I went just 3 miles down the road here. So I went just until I found something. You know, I thought, training manager, I've been an instructor at the detective training school. And so I went there, and the personnel manager, within 6 weeks, went off on maternity leave just before the season started. We needed to employ 1,200 staff, train them. I was asked if I could do the personnel manager's job. I did it for a year. They restructured, made an executive position. I went against her, and I got the executive position as personnel and training executive at Butlins, Wonder West World at Ayr, which is sometimes more dangerous than being a cop in London.
Oh, yeah.
There was
Definitely.
1,200 staff, 600 of them lived in shabby accommodation, up to about 8,000 or 9,000 residents a week. It was a small town. And some of the things that happened in London would have been out of place, and some of the places I worked at in London. So anyway, I did 10 years there as head of personnel. Turned around, got Best on People, got the Queen's Award for training. We got all sorts of awards, built up a great team. And then it got sold to Haven.
Yeah.
Haven Holidays, the caravan holiday people. I was the only one kept on out of the Butlins senior management team by Haven. I lasted a year, and then they found out I was earning more than the general manager under my Butlins salary. So they made the job redundant, and off I went. And we got the opportunity to go to America. My wife went to university, became a teacher. We did a formal government called the Fulbright Scheme Teacher Exchange.
Yes, yeah.
So we swapped lives with an American couple. They came and lived in our house, taught at my wife's school. We lived in their house. My wife taught at their school. We had a 13-year-old son. He came with us. They had a daughter. And we changed cars. We changed lives for a year. And I took my son along to the school to meet his teacher, to find out what class he's going to go in, what he's going to be doing. And the teacher, American guidance teacher, said to me, what about you, Alan? What's your background? So I told her all that. And she said, you'd make an ideal substitute teacher. I said, well, I've never been to university. I haven't got a degree. No, but you've been an instructor at a training school. You've been a training manager. Put an application form in. So I put an application form in thinking, it was a Thursday. Monday morning, your phone rings. Can you come in today to be a substitute teacher?
Brilliant.
I said, but you don't know anything about me. He said, no, it's fine. It's fine. The teacher who was absent had to leave a lesson plan for the class for that day. And all we did is you taught the same lesson plan all day. So I went to it. I thought, well, I don't know if I can do this. Go and stand in front of a class of high school American teenagers.
Where were you in America?
In Maine.
Oh, nice.
It's lovely. It's a beautiful, beautiful state.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I thought I either do it or I don't do it. And I sit here twiddling my thumbs. So I got showered and dressed, and I went in, and I got shown into the class. And the guy next door said, this is the class for the day. When the class come in, just give them this, give them that, and just supervise them, do the register, supervise them. So that's great. So the lesson plan was, the students have been reading To Kill a Mockingbird.
Harper Lee.
Discuss the main strength and characters the strengths and weaknesses of the main characters. So I thought, how the hell am I going to do that? I knew the book, I'd seen the film. So I thought, what am I going to do? I had a flash of inspiration. So the class came in, do the register, and they're sitting there expecting, they're looking at me, look at a new substitute teacher for signs of weakness and stuff. So I started off, right, okay, before you do anything, let me tell you this. I'm a neck detection inspector from New Scotland Yard, and I'm not taking any nonsense from you. And they go, okay. So I then start off with, okay, go back to my instructor days, pick a bright kid, a girl. Who do you think are the main characters and what are their strengths and weaknesses? Put it on the board. And I just winged it. I know what. And by the end of the day, I knew that book back to front. And did a year there.
Fantastic.
Doing that. Great.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great book as well.
It is a great book.
And the film Gregory Peck, it's still one of the cinema classics, isn't it? It's right up there.
It's fabulous.
How did you feel when you handed your warrant card back in the Met?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to take you back slightly, but how did you feel when you handed your warrant card back? And I mean, you're disillusioned.
Yeah.
But what was that like? Because you worked hard, and I know how hard it is to get those police exams, and it was even harder then because you had to do the manual of guidance. There were no Osprey exams.
Yeah.
How did you feel?
I had my warrant card back. I felt naked because that was in some way a protection, a justification for my being.
Yep.
Being who I was as a cop, so I would do this. I'd had to do this, and for years, and even now, I still think of myself as a cop.
Yeah.
And I maybe 3 years ago now, I was out walking one morning. I saw a guy trying the windows of a house, and I phoned the cops, and the cops came, and he got arrested, and a couple of other things I've been involved in. And I'd always, in fact, I intervened in an attempted murder in Witherspoons last year.
Wow.
Where a guy got set upon by 6 people who were kicking and stamping on his head. And that's still waiting fire. So I still see myself very much as a cop. And I'd be driving along behind a car, and I think, if I was a cop, I'd stop that car and have a look at his driving license or whatever. And there's a sense of sadness of leaving. Particularly my leaving day when loads of people came, and it's a bit emotional because the people.
How long had you served at that point when you handed the keys back?
17 years, 15 years, 72 to 88, 16 years roughly.
Right.
Yeah. So did America, and it was great, and we got the best deal in terms of a school we went to, because it's one of the top American state schools, rather than public school, state school. It's a 4th or 5th rated, and it had its own swimming pool and its own, everything. The top. In fact, my son, who was 13, in the first year at high school, I think I'm getting this right, every pupil in the first year was given an Apple Mac computer, laptop.
Wow.
Every pupil. And we're talking about 2002, so 20 years ago. And not only that, they were taught how to use them. So every kid in that school, and it was just that school, got an Apple Mac laptop. And they did all the lessons on the laptop. And I turned up one day as a substitute teacher to cover for a Spanish teacher. And sitting at the front of the class is my son. I didn't speak a word of Spanish. So I said, "Hola," and all the kids automatically said, "Hola." I said, "Right, okay. Your work is on your computer. Just get on and do it." But my son, as you see him, is embarrassed at that.
When you finished out in the States,
Yeah.
Did you want to stay there, or was there that? Because there's always that draw to America. I don't know why, but I'm the same. You know, I've got that, always had that hankering to be over there and work over there. I think people see it bright and shiny. But how did you feel about that?
It certainly was in Maine. Maine is a very, very rich state, almost totally white. A few Vietnamese children have been adopted.
Yeah.
A few Afro-Americans have been adopted, but 98% of the school was white and prosperous. Beautiful state, very rich. I don't know. A substitute teacher was a pittance in terms of pay, so I'd have had to find other work.
Right.
And I did for a short period of time find other work as well before I became a substitute teacher, but nothing would pay me the salary to make it worthwhile staying there. I think this is probably right. But we came back, and I applied for a job before I left America, and it's about 2002 when there's a big push on antisocial behaviour in Scotland.
Yes.
That was the main talking point about how bad society was, and the Scottish government made funding available for antisocial behaviour, and it included community wardens.
Yeah.
I know they go by different names in different parts, but community support officers, whatever. Victim support, a 24-hour helpline for antisocial behaviour, and the one which I applied for was mediation, neighbour disputes.
Yep.
And it was to set up a service in North Ayrshire, which is the next council up from me. There's an organisation called SACRO, who provided mediation services to councils. And they had got a contract from North Ayrshire Council to provide a mediation service for neighbour disputes for the tenants in North Ayrshire. So I went for an interview, got the job, set up an office, employed staff, and because this money was coming from the Scottish Government and it wasn't costing councils anything, a lot of councils applied for it. So I went along and made a pitch to a number of councils and ended up with 5 community mediation services in 5 different councils, with me being the area manager. So having started off as a one-man band in North Ayrshire, I ended up with a team of about 10, roughly 2 in each council area, doing mediation, neighbour disputes. That money came to an end after about 4 years, by which time I was established as a mediation person in the west of Scotland. So the original council, North Ayrshire Council, liked the mediation service, and although it wasn't being funded by the Scottish Government any longer, they wanted to keep it. So they advertised for a tender for someone to provide a mediation service.
Right.
So I put in a tender. Took me forever because my typing skills are not that great, but I did a lot of work. It took me weeks and weeks to get this tender together, and I tendered against my previous company, who made my position of area manager redundant.
Right.
Well, we're making it. I hadn't quite got around to doing it. And I won the tender. So I set up a private company, the West of Scotland Mediation Service, to deliver a mediation service to North Ayrshire Council. A little knowledge is helpful, but from my personnel days, I remember about transfer of undertakings, about if a job gets transferred, the new owner takes it on.
Yep.
So when North Ayrshire Council advertised the mediation service, they put in their advert, the current mediation service will be delivered by in-house. So I queried that with a lawyer and challenged the council, who said, actually, yes, we are making all your staff redundant. So they paid all redundancy money. It paid me redundancy money. paid my son redundancy money, who just happened to work for me. But I got the tender, and I did that for another couple of years as a private business, and very, very lucrative business.
Yeah.
For me. Anyway, that was another stage in my career. So I also, one of the other things I did while I was there, I became a justice of the peace.
Oh, did you?
I did. The training lasted 18 months, and it was every month for 18 months, and a couple of residential weekends.
Yeah.
And eventually I ended up sitting on the bench at the local Justice of the Peace court for a couple of years.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Just again, the very strict selection process. You had to have interviews. You had to have at least 2 interviews. One with the local sheriff, judge, and another panel, and disclosure and things. And
yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. And you sat initially on a bench of 3. Then after 3 months or so, you sat on your own. So you're effectively a magistrate. It's the same thing.
Do you have a same system there as we have here now? Because we've closed most of our magistrates' courts down, and the idea was that you'd be tried by your local peers. But how does that work in Scotland? Have you still got those?
The Justice of the Peace is seen as a member of the public with special powers. And the other thing I got was a regular flow of cops coming for search warrants.
Yeah, of course. You were the friendly magistrate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I never refused them, because I always had. And they always had to have permission from the Procurator Fiscal,
right,
which is equivalent to the CPS in England, before they applied for warrants. So I was safe enough signing them, but I put them through the rigmarole of taking the oath and stuff.
Fantastic. So is that how you got into politics? How you started your political life?
No, I wanted to do something, and I was kind of embarrassed into do it by my brother, who lives in Edinburgh. And he, for his work in a club, it was known then as, politically incorrect, the Handicap Club.
Right.
They helped handicapped children, whichever children
Yep.
special needs. But he was citizen of the year for his work in the Handicap Club. So I thought, I should be doing something, to give back. So I was kind of interested in independence for Scotland. And
yeah,
the guy turned up at my door one day. I joined the SNP, and the guy turned up at my door and said, "Alan, I'm the membership secretary. I just want to introduce myself and say hello and welcome you to the party." I said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Actually, I'm a bit busy at the minute." I wasn't. I couldn't be asked. Just getting involved in politics. So he says, "Oh, I'll come back. I'll come back." I said, "Okay." He says, "When can I come back?" I said, "I'll come back. I'll come back at 5 o'clock or something." He came back, and I listened to his spiel about why Scotland should be independent. And he said, "We're looking for a candidate to be a councillor at the next council elections. Would that something you'd be interested in?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Oh, anyway." I had to think about it. Eventually I went back to him and said, "Actually, there is an election coming up. There's a good chance that there's 4 seats in this ward. There's a good chance that I will win one of the seats, because the current councillor had a good majority and a lot of SNP. So I put myself forward to be a councillor. I got elected, became an SNP councillor for this area where I live. A couple of years in, the leader of the group had some kind of aberration, and he left an important meeting halfway through and didn't come back. And he's found playing one of these war games things.
Right.
I can't remember what they call them now. In a shop anyway, Warhammers.
Yes.
He was found playing Warhammers when he should have been in the council meeting.
Oh dear.
So he, after a period of absence, resigned. and I became the SNP leader. We then had the independence referendum, which I worked at quite a lot. Didn't get it. The woman who led our independence campaign locally stood as MP for this area in 2015 against a majority of 15,000 from Labour. And everyone thought there's no chance whatsoever of her getting elected.
Yeah.
She did. And she's one of 56 out of 59 SNP MPs who got elected.
Wow.
Then, immediately after the referendum, as a kickback for the referendum, I think. Anyway, Boris, Brexit came along in 2016, and we had an election in 2017 to try and break the logjam for Brexit. The SNP MP at the time lost her seat to a Conservative. And then in 2019, they called an election again in Boris to get Brexit done. So the election in December 2019, snap election, 6 weeks notice. I stood against the previous MP to be the candidate, and I won. So I was SNP candidate, and I won the election. I overturned a deficit of 3,000 to win by 2,000. So I was then the SNP MP for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock. And that was on the 12th or 13th of December. And a week later, I was sitting on the green benches in the chamber, Westminster, thinking, what the hell just happened? What am I doing here? How is it possible? Wee boy from Daly with holes in his shoes, a member of Parliament.
Fantastic.
And I'm looking around, I said, God, that looks like Theresa May sitting opposite. It's Theresa May. That's Jeremy Corbyn. What? Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson. And here am I sitting amongst them thinking,
what have I just done?
You know, it's like going from primary school to university, missing out, you know, thinking, you know, a big chunk missing here. And the culture shock, you know, the people, the policies, the procedures, the protocols, how to find your way about Westminster, and it's a maze.
It is.
And you just think, Jesus. But here I am, and there I was, and I was SNP police and crime spokesperson for some reason, and pretty meaningless because the vast majority of police and crime refer to England and Wales.
Yes.
So although I might make a contribution to a speech here and there, I didn't have any great influence, although I did go on the latest police and crime and courts bill, which went through. I was on the bill committee scrutinising that, and I made a few contributions to that here and there. But most of it, 99% of it applied to England only. So there I was, and I did 4.5 years. So a couple of months after I was elected, I get an email to my Parliament address from John Murray.
Yep, the lovely John Murray.
Is that the Allan Dorans who was in the cadets with me in 1972? So I said, yeah, there was, you know, it'd be good to meet and talk about Yvonne Fletcher, who I knew. I didn't know Yvonne. Let's be clear, I didn't know her. I knew of because I was on duty at Holborn at the time.
Oh, just down the road.
Yeah, at that time of the murder, and we stood around in the CID office watching that unfold during the day. And I said I agreed to meet John. So I never knew Yvonne, never worked with her. But that year, I picked up a murder in a place called Lincoln's Inn Fields.
Yes, I know it well.
It's got a bandstand. It's where the lawyers have their chambers, or
yes,
the barristers. And in the middle of the park, the beautiful park there, just off Kingsway, called Lincoln's Inn Field, and it's got a bandstand. And in the morning, the park keeper then would go in and turf out all the vagrants, as they called them then. call them homeless people now, I think.
Yeah.
But they're under the Vagrants Act. They're known as vagrants. And at night, the darkness fell, all the vagrants would come in and sleep around there. So as a detective sergeant at Holborn at the time when I went in one morning, and there was a crime in the book, a major crime, GBH, homeless man kicked by other homeless men, now in hospital. So we think nothing too much of it, it's not a big deal. Went along to, in fact, the hospital phoned. He said, if you're dealing with this, I've got to tell you the guy's going to die.
Wow.
So I got up to the hospital as quick as I could, and I couldn't see him. He was on incubators and intensive care, and he was about to die. So we went down, me and my colleague, to Lincoln Field, and by this time it just starting to get dark, and all the vagrants are drifting in. So I said to the first one, like, we are the police, we're CID, we're investigating a serious assault. And he's four at me, I won't say he's four at me. So I said, look, we're investigating what's likely to be a murder, so you need to, he's four at me again. So I said, so this, I called in a support unit, 10 guys, and I said, anyone who comes back here, bring them into the station, which made me extremely unpopular with the station sergeant.
Yeah, I bet.
Because when we were about over 20 homeless men in the police station, all waiting to be processed. And we had a small team, we got some people into it, identified their who they were, and the guy died. And just by pure chance, the guy from Northern Ireland who won the gold medal in swimming, his name is Whiffin.
Yeah.
That is the name of the murderer in this case.
Wow.
Edward Whiffin. So anyway, cut a long story short, it is a long story. We were struggling to find out who'd done this. Eventually, one of the guys we'd had in and let go phoned me and said, down on the embankment where the vagrants sleep during the day, there's a guy there who knows who's done it, because I heard him telling someone about it. I said, okay, great, but there's usually 20 or 30 guys down there. I said, you know him, he's missing a thumb.
Right.
He knows who did it. So again, I got a carrier of cops and got all these vagrants lined up along the embankment looking for someone with no thumb. And we get them, we find them. And we take him back, and he said, yeah, the guy's name is Eddie. He'd just been released from jail. I can't remember what jail he was, but he's a northerner, he's a Geordie. So we were able to identify this guy, Eddie Whiffin, as the murderer. And I went by this time it's late at night, so I had this looking for this guy, Eddie Whiffin, and a description of him. And two cops walking through the West End come across this guy in a doorway, ask him who he is, and he gives him some nonsense. But the description we got was so good. He said, we think you're Eddie Whiffin. He says, yeah, okay, I am. So they arrested the murderer just from the description that we circulated. Great police work. Two young cops got him back, and we interviewed him, charged him with the murder, went to the Old Bailey with it. I pleaded not guilty, but he got found guilty. And some of the vagrants turned up to give evidence. You know, they would have never found him if they hadn't.
Wow.
But anyway, he was convicted, and it was a good case. So as a point of that story, sorry, it was
That's
about
all right.
Yvonne. When you have a murder inquiry, you draw out any papers relating to the murderer that's stored up. In Scotland Yard or in depository somewhere, where the guy has come to notice of police, usually in relation to a Crown Court case where it'd have to be a document on him, or a complaint against police, or anyways, correspondence about him. And you always check the registry. And the registry came out, and I was reading one of them. I can't remember if Yvonne was the last person to arrest the murderer, or whether she was just a witness.
Right.
But there was Yvonne's signature. You know, I was on duty with PC so-and-so when we saw this man, and we arrested him for, I think he was disorderly, and he subsequently, whatever. So just a wee kind of tie back to Yvonne. So I met with John, and he said, "What can you do for me in Parliament?" So I said, "I've got no idea. I don't know what I can do, but I'll find out." So just by chance, the following week, I had a question at Prime Minister's Questions.
Yeah.
And you get those you have to apply every week, and you go into a ballot. And there's only 15 drawn out of, there's about 400 put in for it. So you get 15 get drawn. So this is my first Prime Minister's question. And you've seen PMQs, you know the format. And
yeah.
So I said to John, I'm going to ask about Yvonne at Prime Minister's Questions. He says, great. So I said to the SNP whip, I want to ask this question. He said, we'd rather you ask something more political, you know, something current about whatever's happening in the world, here, there, or whatever. So I said, actually, it's my PMQ. And they said, yeah, okay. We weren't happy about it. I said, it's my PMQ. And I got up and I said, there's a step before that. I spoke to the whip again. And he said, well, depends what you want to do. If you want to embarrass Boris, and it was Boris, just ask him. You probably won't know anything about it and he'll fob you off. But if you actually want to get a reasonable answer from him, tell him you're going to ask it. So about half an hour before PMQ starts, I emailed his PPS and said, I'm going to ask you this question. So I obviously got through to Boris and I got up and said, 1984, 17th of April 1984, Yvonne Fletcher, I had a detection sergeant at the time. Will the Prime Minister, in fact, I didn't ask to meet with him. I said, will he take steps to ensure the investigation has progressed or something? And he said, oh, thank you for your question. Thank you for your service. What I'll do is I will meet with you. And that's the answer. So all of a sudden I'm meeting a Prime Minister. So 6 months later, maybe 5 months, it got put off because of some crisis in the world somewhere. But eventually I went to see Boris in his private office in the House of Commons. And he said, okay, Alan, yes, I remember. When I was Mayor of London, I remember this case. I remember Yvonne, I remember her mum, Queenie. And what is it you're asking for? I said, well, first I want to ask for a public inquiry into circumstances surrounding Yvonne's murder.
Yeah.
He said, no, I'm not having a public inquiry. And okay, I want you to instruct the CPS to reinvestigate this. I can't do that because they're an independent organisation. I want you to instruct the police to review the evidence. Can't do that. It's a police matter. So it says, okay, in 2015, there's a guy called Salem Brooke was arrested in connection with Yvonne's murder. He was one of the controlling members of the committee in charge of the Libyan embassy that day. But he got himself arrested before Yvonne was shot, we think deliberately, so he couldn't be implicated in her death. He was arrested, and at the time the CPS couldn't proceed because evidence was being withheld by the Home Office and the Special Branch. That was 7 years ago. All I'm asking you to do is to review that evidence to see whether or not it can now be safely released. Not actually do anything else, just to review it.
Yeah. And
if it's still not safe to review it for public security reasons or whatever, then you can't, but I'll do that. He didn't. I got a letter from the policing minister, Kip Malthouse, saying the Prime Minister asked me to write to you to say there is no new evidence. I said, that's not what I asked. I asked him to review the old evidence that's withheld on the grounds of national security.
Yeah.
Got a reply saying, there is no new evidence. And I wrote again that nothing.
That's terrible.
It's awful, isn't it? So I then applied for something called an adjournment debate. Now, adjournment debate happens at the end of House business, Monday to Wednesday. In fact, maybe Monday, Thursday. And it's half an hour. It's when the House has risen. And there's a speaker, and there's a minister, and there's a person proposing the debate. So I tabled an adjournment debate on the murder of Yvonne Fletcher, which meant I got 15 minutes to make a statement, make a speech, and the minister had 15 minutes to respond to it. So John and Julia and a load of other people came along to that debate in Parliament, and a few other people from SNP were there, and they can only take part by asking if I would agree with something they said.
Right.
So I did my 15 minutes, and I gave the circumstances, and I asked 5 questions at the end of it. And the policing minister, Kit Morehouse, got up and spoke for about 10 minutes and didn't answer any of the questions. So that was it. The next stage of it was Rishi Sunak becomes Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And I did the same. I got a PMQ and I asked Rishi the same question, met him in his private office, and he did pay attention, at least. With Boris, it was just, I need to do this, I said I'd do it.
Yeah.
Rishi actually listened and made notes and said, I'll see what I can do. Came back a couple of months later, said, no, there is no new evidence. So twice, I met 2 prime ministers with that. I've also spoken at memorial services. I went to book signing where I met you, Paul,
yes.
And I've spoken at 2 memorial services for Yvonne.
Yeah.
I spoke at a gala dinner for 40th anniversary of that. So that's as far as I've got with that. Now, unfortunately, I lost the last election to a Labour resurgence where we lost 39 out of 48 seats.
Yeah.
It wasn't me, it was the party and the party politics and things. So I'm no longer an MP. There's only one other thing I say about Parliament. That's Boris. You remember the parties during COVID?
Yeah.
And Boris stood up a number of times in Parliament to say there were no parties. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, there were no parties. The House decided to have an investigation into whether or not there were parties. And it referred to a committee known as the Privileges Committee.
Yes.
I was appointed by my party to be on the Privileges Committee and the Standards Committee. The Standards Committee investigated MPs who'd done wrong, like Owen Patterson, Chris, the guy who became a chief whip and unjustly assaulted 3 men, and various other people. But the main ones was the Privileges Committee. And I was on the Privileges Committee, which comprised of Harriet Harman, who's a chair,
yeah,
4 Conservatives, and me. And the Privileges Committee investigated Boris Johnson for 14 months. You like on it. And we were obstructed at every step of the way by the government. And we asked for all the correspondence, all the emails that passed between Boris, his advisors, his civil servants, and anything to do with the parties that were held at Downing Street.
Yeah.
And we got a pile of documents this high, and every name was redacted. We got a bundle of photographs that high, with every face pixelated. And that's the length they went to prevent us getting to the truth.
How corrupt.
Very. So we had a confrontation. We got the chief cabinet minister, his name escapes me, and we said to him, look, we've been asked to do this investigation by the House. If you don't give us this by Friday, we're going back to the House and we are going to kick up a stink. and you're going to be left with a red face, and you're going to be publicly denounced. So by Friday, we got everything we needed, but that set the investigation back 6 months. So we did the investigation, and I don't know if you remember this, Paul, but we had Boris came in front of the committee, and it's televised.
Yes.
It went on for about 4 hours because they had to have a break, at least once, for voting during the interview. And it's televised and shown worldwide. And we'd all agreed questions that we're going to ask Boris. And as it happened, I was the last person to get questions. But I asked him, we'd been to Downing Street, and we'd had the tour, and we saw where they sat out in the garden, we saw how close it was to people having a party, and we saw the room where the party was held, and how Boris had to go past it. He had to walk along a corridor, and this room is in front of him, where there's maybe 100 people having a party. The door doesn't shut. There's 100 people having a party, 2 meters from where Boris has to turn left to go up to his flat. And Boris said, didn't see it. You know, and it was just
incredible.
Nice. So anyway, it was televised. I got to ask his questions. He answered. He said I didn't see it, and asked a couple of other questions. So at the end of the interview, we went back to the committee room, and Harriet Harman said to us, "Well, what do you all think?" I said, "Well, I think you should go to jail." And there's a kind of nervous laughter around the room. I said, no, I'm serious. I think that man should go to jail. And they said, oh, well, yeah, we can talk about that. And we went all around the houses. Ultimately, we produced a report. And the report was produced by Harriet and the clerk. It's an outstanding report. Before it was finalised, I had a draft. And we were asked to go individually to meet Harriet and the clerk and discuss the report to make sure we're happy with it, and more importantly, the punishment. So the punishment, if you got more than 10 days suspension, you had to go to a recall election. You had to stand for a re-election.
Right.
So the final draft report said 20 days. I said, well, I'm not signing that. I'm not agreeing to that, because the consensus of the committee, everyone had to agree with the final report.
Yeah.
Didn't have any dissenters. Everyone had to agree. So I said, I'm not signing, I'm not agreeing to 20 days, because he will appeal that, and he'll probably go down to less than 10, and he will get off scot-free. And I am not signing anything that says less than 60 days. 60 days. So that was a kind of private discussion we had. And then it went back to the committee, and some said, 20 days is enough, and some said 30 days. I said, 60 days. I'm not signing anything with less than 60 days punishment. So various people said to me, Alan, Mum, that's unreasonable. 60 days is excessive. No one's ever had 60 days before. I said, no Prime Minister has ever lied consistently to the House of Commons and to the public. It is one of the most egregious cases I've ever seen in my whole life.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's horrendous. It's a standard of our democracy. If we go for 20 days and the appeals. So eventually, I said, well, I'm putting down an amendment. And my amendment says that he should be expelled immediately from Parliament. And Beth Rigsby, the Sky TV political reporter, text out saying, Alan Dorans, SNP MP, has tabled an amendment saying Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, should be exploded. And it's predicted text. And it went out, and within about a couple of minutes, it had gone viral. It should be, and it said, sorry, it should have been expelled. Anyway, it went to a vote, and the 4 Conservatives voted against it. So I said, I'm holding up for 60 days, and during the course of a couple of days, some of the Conservatives came to me and said, Alan, come on, be reasonable. I said, 60 days, not less than 60 days. So Harriet Harman was a very, very scrupulously fair. And she said, well, we need to get consensus on this. And eventually they settled on grudgingly, I think, 60 days. So we sent the draft report to Boris, and he came back and said, the kangaroo court, not taking any notice of this, I don't think they've got jurisdiction over me, and he refused to accept it. So he made a number of personal attacks, and so did Jacob Rees-Mogg and a couple of others on individual members of the committee. So we slapped another 30 days on for that. So he's facing 90 days suspension. Wow. And he resigned. And that was the end of it.
Do you miss it? I mean, do you miss the politics or the Parliament? I know it's only recent occurrence, but
I certainly miss being a member of the Privileges Committee and the Standards Committee, because it seemed to bring all my life experiences together.
Yes.
You know, having been a justice of peace and having been a personnel guy and having been a cop, and the investigative nature of that, I do miss. I don't miss sitting in Parliament and the green benches for 4 hours, getting called, being limited to speaking for 4 minutes, to say something that's already been said 20 or 30 times already during the course of a day.
Yeah.
And there is so much bullshit, to be honest, goes on in Parliament. You know, voting. I unfortunately broke my femur somewhere along the line in Parliament. I fell down a step.
Oh. And
I had a proxy vote for the last couple of years. It's got me out of most votes. I got all votes, and I have to go and vote. One of the chief whip voted on my behalf, however they wanted. But you could wait for hours. You'd have 200-300 MPs sitting around Westminster for hours and hours waiting to vote. And the vote, as you know, would be meaningless anyway, because the Conservatives at that time had a majority of 80.
Yeah.
So we voted, you know, it didn't really matter. So I don't miss that. I certainly don't miss travelling to London every week or most weeks, there and back. But I did enjoy being there, and I wouldn't have missed the experience and the memories and, you know, things like that. And I would have done another term if I got elected, quite happily.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Will you lobby Keir Starmer now regarding, because you know how the process works, regarding Yvonne Fletcher? Do you think there's any benefit from people to do that?
I think so. I think I need to meet with John, see what he wants to do, because I've always gone follows his of what he wants me to do. Although I'll suggest that he needs to agree it. I don't want to go off on a tangent.
No.
He may have found another representative in Parliament out of the 650 who's prepared to stand up for Yvonne. I'm not sure that there's much me writing to Keir Starmer will achieve. Maybe Vic Cooper as the new Home Secretary might be amenable to something. But certainly there's a scandal there hidden.
Oh yeah.
They're not prepared to put in the public realm. It might be that Mabrouk was a spy for Britain in the Libyan embassy at the time.
Yeah.
It might be that there are all sorts of implications in Matt and John's book, No Ordinary Day, about to do with trade unions and Arthur Scargill and the coal strike and Margaret Thatcher and how deals were done with Libya for cheap oil and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it in our time.
Well,
I don't think we will.
I mean, Keir Starmer is a lawyer.
Yeah.
And he is a man who has supported justice for his whole working life. Maybe he'll look at it from a different perspective and make the concessions that are required in order to get this into the public domain and give John the support in relation to a prosecution.
Yeah, that would be the idea. But you remember I had a civil case. Did you follow the civil case? John,
Yeah.
Yeah, the Police Federation of England and Wales refused to support John in his civil case, but they eventually were embarrassed into doing it and held a civil case at the law courts in the Strand, which Mabrook was summoned to attend, but he refused.
Yeah.
And he subsequently said it was unfair because he wasn't allowed to attend, but he was given an opportunity. And the judge at the end of it said, I find in a civil court that beyond all probable doubt, the probability, I think, is in civil court, he would have been convicted. He was responsible jointly with others for the death of Yvonne.
Yeah.
Although he wasn't physically there when she was shot. So there's evidence there. Whether or not it'd be enough for criminal conviction beyond all reasonable doubt, but it'd be good to be able to test it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before we go, sir, I'm going to give you the opportunity to add, alter, or correct anything in relation to the statement that you've made today. It's an old term that we used many years ago when we were taking handwritten statements. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Your dad's medals, I assume, are directly behind you.
Yeah.
Pride of place, and absolutely fantastic. But is there anything you'd like to add to our conversation?
I'd actually like to know a bit about yourself, rather than just this has been a monologue pretty much. But in terms of in closing, I think before we come on to talk about you perhaps a little bit, it's not advice, but my views on life in general are that you've got to put yourself out there. You got to be committed. Volunteering, I've always found has been a way to do it. Volunteering for anything.
Yeah.
Get in, do it, learn from it. Be flexible and be prepared to change. I said earlier, I don't think of myself as a cop, but I've got a more relaxed view about life and people and people's lifestyles now than I had as a cop, because it's pretty much as a cop I was there. And I think I was there for all the right reasons. I'm there to help people, make things better for people. It's always kind of cheesy the expressions people use. But I've always regarded it as being a profession, a vocation, to be a professional cop. And some of the guys that I see today let us down. But others, and I've seen others to have been great, just very professional, middle of the line, there to help. But at the end of the day, they are the police and they're paid to be the police.
The SNP have had a turbulent time with leadership, haven't they?
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you, I thought Nicola Sturgeon did a great job during COVID. Yes. I think the deliveries that she gave were absolutely superb. There was no waffle or rubbish in there. She was straight to the point and she did what she had to do. I think it's unfortunate that she finds herself in the position that she's in. And, politicians like police officers, when one police officer goes off the rail, the rest of us take a deep breath because we feel let down. And do you, I'm not preempting anything, but how do you feel about what's happened there?
We have been let down badly by the party and some individuals in it.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Nicola Sturgeon was outstanding during the pandemic, but she allowed things to go on at an organisational level where they indulged themselves on their own favourite policies, and gender recognition was one of them.
Yeah.
Gender recognition, as far as I'm concerned, people are entitled to be whatever they want to be, but there was the wrong time to introduce it. It was introduced very badly. We lost 50,000 members because of gender recognition. We had 120,000 at one time, we're down to 70. And the gender recognition and various other things that happened during the at headquarters, the gerrymandered the National Executive Committee and put on a lot of people with some extreme views about gender, basically. And we had some horrendous press. We had with Derek Mackay, who's a Scottish minister, who texted a 16-year-old boy looking for sex. We had Margaret Ferrier, the COVID Margaret, who travelled all around the country, having been diagnosed with COVID. With Patrick Grady, who is a friend of mine, touched up a man in a pub at a party 6 years ago, all hugely damaging. We've had a guy called Michael Matheson who charged £11,000 on expenses to his iPad that his son's used. We've got Peter Morrell and the ongoing saga about the motorhome. And we lost our way. We had been 9 years ago, we had 56 out of the 59 MPs. We lost some in 2017, but got back up to 48 in 2019. And now we're down to 9. So between 2019, we've lost 38 seats. The party has lost its way. It was formed to win Scottish independence.
Yeah.
It's gone off a tangent and been infiltrated, some might say. But we're in a very sad state. And I've had the opportunity, I've had a lengthy conversation with John Swinney, who came to visit me twice during the campaign, my campaign. A lengthy conversation with Stephen Flynn, our current leader of Westminster. He's a great guy, by the way. He's a funny guy. He's a character, Stephen. And I've told him I think we've gone wrong, but we would have anticipated losing a few seats at the election where Labour had an exceptional candidate. The Labour candidate in my constituency here is a woman who's a councillor in locally. She's dreadful. We had a hustings at a school where there's about 70 or 80 people there. And by common acknowledgement, I walked to hustings, and she had a shocker. And the opinion was if she went home, she'd have cried about the way she couldn't answer the questions, she didn't know what the policy was, she didn't know anything about the constituency. And we could have, in our expression, put up a monkey and they'd have got elected for Labour because the Labour campaign was stronger than ours. We went on change. People interpret that as change from Tories, so we need to vote for Labour. But I lost 10,000 votes. I got 20,000 votes last time. I got 10,000 this time, and I've helped 8,000 to 10,000 people in the last 4.5 years.
That's heartbreaking.
I have been to hundreds of community events, taken part in debates in the Commons, written to hundreds of ministers about individual constituents, situations ranging from visas to driving licenses to miscarriages of justice. And I'm in the paper every week. Allan Doran, your SNP MP, has done this week.
Yeah.
As in, I expected it to be closer than it was last time, but to lose by 10,000 votes, and having spoken to various other MPs who didn't get elected, some of them are fabulous. Joanna Cherry, I know she's a bit controversial, but Joanna's a fabulous MP. Alison Thulu, you might not know, but she's the Home Office spokesperson for this MP, and a whole raft of them who are hard-working, honest, diligent MPs there for the right reason lost their seats because the party let us down.
Became dysfunctional. So that's a great shame, mate. Well, listen, please keep in touch. Lovely. Well, listen, take care of yourself, and I will speak to you soon.
How do I access your podcasts?
I'll send you the links, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you all the links, and then you can cherry pick through some of them. I've got 104-year-old Normandy veterans to. Oh, I've had amazing people that have made me cry, and I make no apologies. Simon Maloney. He's on the roof of a building in Afghanistan and gets shot through the throat. I mean, there's some swearing in there, but I said to him, mate, if you don't buy a lottery ticket, if you don't believe in God, go and buy a lottery ticket, because he got shot through the. He got shot between his Adam's apple and his throat, and the bullet was a tracer round, so it effectively sealed it. He got back on the roof and shot the Taliban fighter that he was fighting against.
Wow.
Amazing people, and everyone's got a story, and that's why we do that's why I do what I do. Yeah,
fascinating. I'll have to listen to it.
Yeah, I'll send you the links, and then this will be out on Monday anyway. I'll have this out on Monday for you. So.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Perfect.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Take care, and I wish you very well.